We're going to turn next to a member of Parliament across our northern border. His name is Colin Carrie. If you're there, Mr. Carrie, could we go to you next?
Well, thank you very much for calling this important meeting. Since COVID-19's lockdowns and mandates, Canadians have seen our sovereignty, our charter rights, and our civil liberties tested. Trust in our institutions, our public health system challenged, and ordinary Canadians realized something was very wrong. In Canada, remember, we have a Prime Minister. When asked which country he admired the most, do you remember what he said? He said he admires the basic dictatorship of China. Yes, China. You may think our PM's ideas are wacko, but sadly this is the truth that Canadians face today. While our government has signaled acceptance of this treaty, many of my constituents do not agree and have outstanding questions. Our freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of consent, and medical treatment were all enthusiastically challenged by our own government in Canada under the COVID dictates, centrally controlled and communicated by the WHO. Canada's PM intentionally created an identifiable minority group, anti-vaxxers, and gleefully used all the power of the Canadian government to marginalize, dehumanize, and keep over 6 million Canadians from fully participating in Canadian society. These Canadians, many with health concerns, were called misogynist, racist, with unacceptable views, and they should not be tolerated. We all remember the facade of the Illegal Emergencies Act and how it was used to freeze bank accounts. Businesses were shattered, seniors and loved ones died alone, and our children's education was compromised, and churches were closed. Canadians do not want this to happen again. The WHO says the new treaty is non-binding. My constituents are asking me if that's so. Why did they remove the term non-binding from the definitions? We know that the current treaty acknowledges that the WHO only has an advisory board that issues recommendations. Not so with the new treaty. If the WHO's new amendments to the IHR would not bind nations, then why is the WHO self-appointed as the primary decision-making authority, or the directing and coordinating authority when an international pandemic emergency is declared? What is the definition of an emergency? Who decides? Who complies? If Canadians want out of the treaty, what's the process? What's the cost? What criteria defines a pandemic or global emergency? Colleagues, this treaty will legally compel actions based on decisions that are made by unelected WHO technocrats, the same technocrats who tasked themselves to declare an emergency at their whim. Why would any country sign on to a new treaty when we haven't conducted a serious evaluation of the last pandemic policy response? Will this treaty institutionalize WHO's COVID pandemic mistakes? Why did they demonize and ignore legitimate opinions and data from esteemed scientists? Why censor valid, differing opinions? Who decides what constitutes disinformation, misinformation? Colleagues, this is about our sovereignty, our nation's right for self-determination. Canadians want local demographics acknowledged, not ignored. Decisions made by Canadians for Canadians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrie. It turns out that what is happening in Canada often has an impact here as well, and so those of us in the United States are especially appreciative of your leadership.